On the evening of June 9, 2026, a U.S. Army AH-64 Apache attack helicopter went into the Persian Gulf off the coast of Oman. Two American aviators ended up in open water after dark in one of the most surveilled, most contested stretches of ocean on the planet. Within 2 hours, both of them were out. Not because another helicopter flew in, not because a ship full of sailors pushed through the strait to reach them, because the United States sent an unmanned surface vessel and it got there first. That has never happened before in the history of the American military, not once, not anywhere, not in any conflict. The door that opened that night has not closed, and understanding why requires sitting with the full weight of what actually occurred rather than the headline version that most people absorbed. Start with the geography, because the geography is everything. The Strait of Hormuz is roughly 20 miles wide at its narrowest point. Through that 20 miles flows somewhere around 20% of the world's oil supply. Every supertanker, every LNG carrier, every commercial vessel trying to reach the ports of the Gulf states has to pass through that corridor. Whoever controls it, or even just makes it feel dangerous enough that shippers think twice, holds enormous leverage over the global economy. Iran has understood this for decades. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy has built its entire Gulf strategy around that single geographic fact, and their approach is not to match a U.S. carrier group head-on, because they cannot. Instead, they built what military analysts call a mosquito fleet, hundreds of small, fast attack craft designed to swarm, harass, and threaten in numbers that are difficult to counter cleanly. It is an intelligent strategy for a force that cannot win a conventional naval exchange. And it had been working well enough to keep the strait feeling unstable for months, even with American naval presence operating in the corridor. That was the environment the Apache crew was flying into that Monday evening. The AH-64 is not a surveillance aircraft. It is there to be the thing that Iranian fast attack boats and drones have to worry about. It flies low, moves fast, carries Hellfire missiles and a 30mm chain gun, and is lethal at exactly the ranges where Iran's Mosquito fleet operates. Its job in that theater is essentially deterrence through presence. The credible threat that anything Iran puts on the water near commercial shipping lanes can be engaged quickly and decisively. When it went down, that mattered not just as a human emergency, though it was absolutely a human emergency first. It also mattered because it removed a deterrent from a space where deterrence is the entire mission. U.S. Central Command confirmed the crew was recovered within approximately 2 hours of going into the water. Both aviators were pulled out in stable condition. The cause of the crash remains under investigation and may not be made fully public for some time. The aircraft could have been brought down by a mechanical failure. A helicopter pushed hard in a demanding environment of heat, humidity, low altitude, and potentially debris from prior drone engagements, with something finally giving way under that cumulative stress. Iranian involvement is also being examined. U.S. officials have stated they are looking at the possibility of hostile action. The location near Oman, on the far side of the strait from Iran's main coastline, makes a direct shoot-down somewhat less likely, but does not eliminate it from the analysis. The cause matters for the investigation. It is not, however, the most consequential part of what happened that night. The most consequential part is what unfolded in the 2 hours after the aircraft hit the water, because those 2 hours exposed something about the evolution of American military capability that most public commentary missed entirely in its rush to frame the Apache loss as either a failure or a provocation. Think carefully about the tactical problem U.S. commanders faced in the minutes after that helicopter went down. 2 American soldiers are floating in open water after dark. The water around them is the most actively threatened maritime environment on Earth at that particular moment. Iran's fast attack fleet is operating in that corridor. Sea mines have been laid. Underwater drones move through that strait. Shore-based anti-ship missiles watch from the Iranian coastline. Every single asset sent to recover those 2 aviators becomes a potential second target the moment it enters that water. In a conventional rescue, you accept that risk because there is no alternative. You send the helicopter, you send the boat, you put more people in danger to bring your own people home because that is the covenant and you honor it regardless of cost. The question military planners have wrestled with for decades is what happens when the rescue itself becomes the catastrophe. What happens when the mission to save 2 people puts 10 more at direct risk of death or capture? On that Monday night, for the first time, there was a different answer available. Task Force 59 is the U.S. Navy's dedicated unmanned systems and artificial intelligence unit, operating out of 5th Fleet headquarters in Bahrain. It has been building something in that Gulf for years, quietly and mostly without public attention. Robotic surface vessels, autonomous underwater platforms, AI-driven sensor networks distributed across one of the world's most operationally demanding waterways. Most people had never heard of Task Force 59 before this incident. The specific unmanned surface vessel involved in the rescue has not been publicly identified, and speculation about the exact platform is beside the point. What U.S. Central Command confirmed is that an unmanned maritime drone located the downed aircrew, reached them, and transported them to safety. 2 soldiers, open water, after dark, Iranian territory close enough to matter, retrieved by a vessel with no crew aboard, no American sailors at risk, no second target offered to anyone watching from the shore. Here is where the strategic picture diverges sharply from the surface optics, and the surface optics are genuinely worth engaging with honestly before setting them aside. An Apache helicopter went down. A fully equipped AH-64E cost somewhere north of $30 million. Iranian state media immediately began framing this as a victory, which is entirely predictable and entirely rational behavior from their perspective. If you are watching through the lens of simple win-loss accounting on military hardware, yes, Iran can claim a real asset was removed from the board. That framing is not wrong on its own terms. But here is what was actually happening in those same 2 hours on the Iranian side. The IRGC understood immediately that 2 American military aviators were in the water in their operational theater. Those 2 people, had they been captured, would have been extraordinarily valuable at exactly the diplomatic moment Iran currently occupies. Negotiations over a potential deal are underway. American military prisoners in Iranian hands during active negotiations are not just a military prize. They are a diplomatic weapon of the first order. Leverage at the table, propaganda at home, a demonstration of capability and reach that reshapes the entire negotiating dynamic. Iran understood this. Their naval assets moved toward the search area. Their state media began preparing a narrative about the capture of American soldiers. They moved fast because they understood precisely what was at stake. The robot boat moved faster. Those 2 Americans were recovered and out of Iranian reach before Iranian forces could reach the site. There was no prisoner. There was no propaganda photograph. There was no bargaining chip brought to any table. Iran held a press conference. A $30 million helicopter is replaceable on a timeline measured in months. The strategic leverage Iran was reaching for that night was a once-in-a-news cycle opportunity that does not come around twice. Task Force 59 closed that window in 2 hours without risking a single additional American life, and that is the actual outcome of the incident stripped of both American triumphalism and Iranian spin. It is worth being precise about what is confirmed versus what is inference here, because the incident has attracted commentary that blends the two without flagging the difference. The helicopter loss, the autonomous rescue, the 2-hour timeline, and Task Force 59's involvement are all confirmed by U.S. Central Command. The claim that Iranian forces were actively racing to capture the crew and had a prisoner narrative prepared is plausible and consistent with IRGC operational behavior, but it is not publicly confirmed. It is a reasonable inference from known Iranian doctrine and stated motivations, not a documented fact. The distinction matters. The rescue is historically significant regardless of whether Iran came close to reaching the crew. Treating the near capture as confirmed fact rather than strong inference inflates the drama without adding analytical value. Similarly, the named drone systems that have appeared in commentary around this incident, underwater mine-hunting platforms, long-duration ISR vehicles, vessel tracking devices designed to attach and follow targets over extended periods, these programs exist in public defense reporting and are consistent with the kind of capabilities Task Force 59 has been building. Whether all of them are currently deployed and operational in the Gulf as opposed to in various stages of testing and integration is a different question, one that open-source reporting cannot fully answer. The rescue confirmed that at least one autonomous surface vessel was operational in that theater at that level of capability. Everything beyond that specific confirmation should be held with appropriate uncertainty. The deeper question the rescue raises, and the one that will drive defense planning for years, is what happens next to the strategic logic that has protected Iran's Strait operations. The Mosquito Fleet strategy rests on a specific assumption that the cost of contesting Iranian harassment is always higher for the United States than the cost of tolerating it at some manageable level. Every time an American manned asset enters that environment, there is a human being inside it who can be killed, captured, or exploited. American commanders have had to weigh the risk of escalation every single time they respond to Iranian provocations. Do you fire on 20 fast attack boats and risk killing 50 Iranian sailors and triggering the full escalation ladder? Or do you use minimal force, accept some harassment, and keep the temperature manageable? That calculation has constrained American options in the Strait for years. An armed autonomous surface vessel operating in a swarm configuration changes that calculation at its foundation. When there is no American aboard the asset being harassed, the risk calculus is no longer about weighing American lives against the cost of response. It becomes hardware against hardware, and in that equation, the United States has a very different set of options available. Iran releases its fast attack boats into a corridor patrolled by autonomous American surface vessels. The response does not require exposing a single sailor. There is no escalation ladder triggered by a body count. There is simply a contested waterway where the cost of harassment has become very high for the side doing the harassing, with no reciprocal leverage available through captures or casualties. The Monday night rescue was the first live operational confirmation that the foundational capability for this doctrine actually works in a real contested environment under real pressure. It was not a demonstration in controlled conditions. It was the thing itself. The IRGC's position in this calculus is worth understanding at more than just the military level, because the organization's interests in the Strait are not purely strategic. The IRGC controls significant portions of Iranian commerce flowing through that waterway. It has economic stakes in how the Strait operates that exist independently of state-level Iranian foreign policy. The Mosquito Fleet is not just a tactical response to American naval presence. It is also, at some level, a protection operation that generates leverage and economic benefit for the organization running it. If the cost of running that fleet escalates because autonomous American systems can contest it without triggering conventional escalation, the economic logic of the entire operation starts to erode. A diplomatic deal at the political level that is not backed by something that makes harassment genuinely and consistently costly is a deal on paper only. The capability demonstrated on Monday night is the backing that makes a deal meaningful in practice rather than symbolic. There is a legitimate tension in the current American posture that deserves honest acknowledgement rather than dismissal. The Trump administration is pursuing a negotiated framework with Iran at the same moment that Iranian forces are laying mines, operating drones in the vicinity of American aircraft, and asserting control over an international waterway. Those two things sit uncomfortably next to each other, and the discomfort is real. The argument that the operational picture is stronger than the surface optics suggest is not the same as the argument that the diplomatic strategy is correct. Those are separate questions. The operational reality that American autonomous systems are now present in that Gulf in a way that changes the cost of Iranian harassment is one thing. Whether the deal being pursued reflects that operational reality appropriately, whether it extracts the leverage it should, whether the terms being negotiated are commensurate with the capability the United States is demonstrating in the water, these are open and genuinely contested questions that one rescue operation cannot answer. Zooming out from the Strait to the broader pattern, what happened in the Taiwan Strait the same week is worth placing alongside the Hormuz incident rather than treating as a separate story. Chinese military assets tracked and shadowed the Dutch frigate HNLM De Ruyter as it transited what China considers its strategic waters. This followed a month in which over 200 Chinese military aircraft entered Taiwan's air defense identification zone. Taiwan's government responded by passing a multi-year defense budget specifically allocated to American weapons systems, which is the behavior of a government drawing its own conclusions from watching how contested waterways play out when one side has autonomous systems and the other does not. The Chinese approach in the Taiwan Strait and the Iranian approach in the Strait of Hormuz share a structural logic. Neither side can match American military capability in a conventional confrontation, so both sides use presence, harassment, and the implicit threat of escalation to create friction and assert a kind of de facto control. Whether this represents genuine coordination between Beijing and Tehran, or simply the convergent logic of two actors facing similar strategic constraints, is a question open-source analysis cannot definitively resolve. The behavior is parallel. The intent behind the parallelism is less clear. The debate happening inside American defense planning about manned versus unmanned systems in high-end conflict, about whether hypersonic strike platforms should carry pilots or fly autonomously, about where human judgment remains irreplaceable and where it simply imposes physiological ceilings that machines do not face. That debate is long-running and will not be settled by a single incident. What Monday night added to it is one more data point on the unmanned side of the ledger, and data points in that debate accumulate rather than resolve. A robotic vessel performed a mission in a contested environment that previously required exposing human beings. It performed it faster and with zero additional risk to American personnel. That fact enters every room where the broader question is being discussed, and it enters those rooms with more weight than a laboratory demonstration would carry, because it happened in the real environment, under real conditions, with real stakes. Before returning to the broader picture, the question of how this incident fits into the arc of American autonomous military development deserves more than a passing mention, because the temptation to treat Monday night as a sudden arrival of the future misreads how these capabilities actually develop. Task Force 59 was established in 2021 specifically to accelerate the integration of unmanned systems and artificial intelligence into Fifth Fleet operations. It has been running exercises, deploying platforms, integrating sensor networks, and building operational experience in the Gulf for years before this rescue. The rescue was not a surprise capability that appeared from nowhere. It was the visible surface of a sustained, deliberate program that had been operating below the threshold of public attention because nothing had occurred to force it into the news. The lesson is not that the United States suddenly has autonomous systems. The lesson is that the development pipeline for these capabilities has been running long enough and seriously enough that when a real operational need arose at 2 a.m. in a contested waterway, the answer was already there. That is a different and more sobering observation than America unveiled a new weapon. It suggests the gap between what is publicly known about these programs and what is operationally deployed may be substantially larger than most outside observers assume. Programs like Task Force 59 do not announce their full inventories. They build, test, deploy, and operate in the space between press releases. Monday night was one moment when the deployment and the news cycle happened to collide, producing visibility that the program would not otherwise have sought. The reasonable assumption is that what became visible is not the totality of what exists. This is a YouTube commentary channel producing content optimized for engagement, and that context shapes how the information should be received. The channel is doing something more analytically serious than most of its genre, engaging with real doctrine, real units, and real strategic logic rather than just narrating events. But it is still selecting and arranging facts to support a coherent narrative arc, and a coherent narrative arc is not the same thing as a balanced intelligence assessment. The triumphalist conclusion that Iran failed, that the robot boat won, that American autonomous capability is decisively reshaping the theater, is a legitimate argument. It should be evaluated as an argument rather than accepted as a settled conclusion. The Apache is gone. The strait is still contested. The ceasefire remains fragile. The deal being negotiated may or may not reflect the operational leverage America now holds. The rescue was historic. Those things are all simultaneously true, and the video's structure, which builds toward a reveal and a crescendo, tends to crowd out the parts of the picture that complicate the arc. What the incident has confirmed, in a way that no amount of program announcements or capability briefings could, is that the United States has autonomous systems operating in the world's most contested waterway at a level of capability that is now a demonstrated operational fact rather than a promise. The first time anything becomes real in that way, the first live operational use in a genuinely contested environment, is a categorical threshold, not an incremental step. The Apache crew went into the water. The robot boat got there first. Whatever comes next in that strait, and in the Taiwan Strait, and in the broader debate about what deterrence looks like in a world where autonomous systems are no longer theoretical, it comes after that threshold was crossed on a Monday night in June, in the dark, in the Persian Gulf, without a single additional American life at risk. The cause of the crash is still under investigation. The deal being negotiated may succeed or collapse. The strait will remain contested for years regardless of what any agreement says on paper. All of that is true, and also true simultaneously and without contradiction. Something happened that night that had never happened before, in an environment specifically designed to make it costly, and it worked. That fact belongs to the historical record now, whatever interpretation one places on it.